And now we're going to hear from someone who has not spent decades and decades in volunteer or professional Jewish life, Natalie Silverlieb.
I have a magical backpack. I received this gift when I first volunteered as a madracha with Taglit Birthright. My seemingly average blue backpack is anything but that. It fits an extraordinary amount of items, and I am convinced it miraculously expands to fit my needs. Most importantly, the backpack, emblazoned with an Israeli flag patch sewn on the front, also manages to hold my memories. Each time I look at the backpack, I am reminded of how unexpectedly my life was changed after my first trip to Israel as a Birthright participant. Like a magnet, my love for Israel has pulled me to return time and time again. This backpack has traveled with me across the world and is like my touchstone to Israel, for Israel is always with me wherever I may be. I'm grateful for the many travel opportunities I've had, but with this exposure has also come a tangible, albeit unfortunate, awareness of the anti-Semitic and the anti-Israel feelings that persist throughout the world. My cherished backpack, bearing its Israeli flag with pride, has exposed me to anti-Semitism both while traveling abroad and even at home in New York City. At times I've had to cover the Israeli flag patch with tape when I encountered anti-Israel demonstrations in Istanbul. And at a coffee shop, I found myself turning over my backpack so as to not draw attention to its Magen David. Right here, in New York City subways and other transit systems in major cities throughout the US, there are posters claiming to call for peace. This message of peace is nothing more than a facade, a cover-up for crueler intentions. In reality, these posters are advertising anti-Semitism and anti-Israel propaganda. Disguised in these messages of peace are the true motives of these advertisements. The questioning of the legitimacy of Israel as a nation, calling for the end of US military aid to Israel, vital aid, imperative for Israel's defense. These publicly displayed messages are direct attacks on Israel's sovereign rights, her obligation to the security of her citizens. Should Israel not be allowed those same rights afforded to all other sovereign states? In denying Israel her basic rights, the lives of her citizens are consequently rendered invalid. Human beings encountering fears, enduring loss, hopes for peace and prosperity. And what about those who've suffered death? Victims of terrorism, war? Are these lives lost not legitimate? Are they not worthy of recognition? I am appalled that such insidious messages influencing public opinion and fostering hate for Israel and consequently the Jewish people would so recklessly be permitted for display in my city, in the subways I've ridden for the last 13 years. Should I be fearful to wear my magical backpack, walking proudly as a Jew and a Zionist in the city I call home? Will I provoke trouble for myself by merely being myself, carrying a symbol of the country that I love, that is also my ancient and historic home? This is not only an effort to delegitimize Israel, but to delegitimize me. As a repercussion of this false advertising, the stigmas attached to Israel also afflict her supporters. We are those supporters. I typed the word delegitimization into Google, and sure enough, at the top of the search appeared the delegitimization of Israel, making Israel synonymous with a word that is defined as to diminish or destroy the legitimacy, prestige, or authority. To diminish and then destroy Israel's prestige and authority, especially as the Jewish state, seeks to negate her people's accomplishments, unequivocal achievements and contributions to the world, the nation that has prospered and flourished against all odds. Israel is incessantly criticized, her actions critiqued under a magnifying glass, judged by a different standard by the media and international community. Well, I also hold Israel to a different standard, a higher standard. And time and again, Israel has surpassed my expectations. She surprises me, fills me with pride and inspiration, knowing that as a Jew, Israel is a part of me. Israel, under constant threat and smaller than New Jersey, is a world leader in high-tech, biotechnology, life sciences, computers, as well as green technology. Its scientists are innovators on the cutting edge of every field of human endeavor, responsible for the creation of life-saving new medical devices. Israel has the third highest rate of entrepreneurship and the highest rate among women and among people over 55 in the world. In a land of mostly desert, it entered the 21st century as the only country with a net gain in its number of trees. And contrary to what others may believe, Israel does not take from the international community. It gives. Relative to its population, Israel is the largest immigrant-absorbing nation on earth, taking in people in search of life, of freedom, and opportunity afforded in this democracy. Israel is a first responder during international crisis, giving humanitarian aid and search and rescue support to those in need, such as in Haiti and Japan. Oh, and no big whoop, Israelis invented the cell phone and voicemail technology. And the list goes on. Like my grandfather used to say, it isn't bragging when it's the truth. And we must get the truth out. Where are the posters advertising those facts? These contributions should be plastered on walls all over the world. I mean, it would be incredible for the word Israel to be instantaneously synonymous with any one or all of her awesome achievements. I've surveyed friends and acquaintances asking what immediately comes to mind when they hear the word Israel. The answers ranged from words such as sadness, desert, war, refugees, settlements, struggle, not dissimilar to my delegitimization Google search. The world is being influenced with a picture of Israel smeared by those who seek to diminish the reality of her true character. In the words of George Orwell, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. We as Zionists must have a louder voice, educating others outside of our community, sharing our personal stories and experiences, our passion for Israel, its beauty, history, its humanity, and all the wonders that come to mind when we think of Israel. A lie cannot live, said Dr. King, but lies spread like disease without the sunlight of truth. As Zionists, we are walking, talking billboards, ambassadors to Israel. We have the opportunity to illuminate the real Israel with our voice. Israel's answer is her people, the people who support her and speak of her truths, the people who celebrate the incredible place that is the homeland of the Jewish people. As a Zionist, I am that person. We are those people. There may be varying definitions of and opinions about Zionism, but for me, it is the hope that Israel will be recognized as an inspiration for the world, the beacon for humanity and liberty in a region void of democracy and human equalities. We understand the crucial impact of Israel's prosperity and ripple effect in healing the world. Tikkun Olam. I may be called an idealist, but I am an idealist without illusion. My goal is to live in a world where I wear my backpack openly on my journey in support of Zionism, and to ensure that others have the right to walk proudly, carrying with them their own message, their own backpacks. Thanks.
I think we can agree that Zionism infuses Jewish life and certainly communal Jewish life at all levels. I think we can also agree, as much as we may disagree about issues related to things that have happened post-1967, the delegitimization is not about those things. Delegitimization is about 1948 and maybe 1947, and about the right of a Jewish state to exist in the land of Israel. Though all of us deal with delegitimization in many different ways, I think it is the case that a movement and the various movements that focus specifically on Zionism have, in the context of delegitimization, a specific way to inform the conversation and to argue and make the case against delegitimization and to fight it. In that regard, I think that all four of the speakers who have been here today have made complementary contributions, as different as some of the perspectives were. And I feel privileged to have been associated with these four presentations. I also want to point out that though the program is now running about 35 minutes late, this panel ran exactly to the second on time. And so the delay is not the five of us, it's all the rest of you. Good day.